Jackson trying to escape and run for it, and he's got it and more. Lamar Jackson down the sideline. Will they give it to him? They will. Touchdown, Baltimore.
And with 1:17 left to play on Wild Card Weekend, the Hayes in the barn.
Oh my God! I wish you guys could. I wish we had a camera in here so you could see what we're doing. We're just a bunch of clowns in here.
How much fun is that?
What is up, you guys? It is Jake here, coming to you on a Friday morning of August 6th, bringing you guys just a little bit of a quick intro to an interview that Spenny and I did that is going to serve for today's episode. We did this one last night on Thursday the 5th, talking with Mike Sans of Locked On Bengals. Mike is a sort of a film grinder from the land of the Bengals. He does some stuff with Sports Illustrated, stuff with Locked On Bengals, and is just an all-around good dude, and was a great chat. Breaking down what we're going to be expecting from Cincy, you know, that orange and black attack that they're going to have there with Joe Burrow, with Zach Taylor, with all these guys on this, to some degree, new-look roster. I think they're an interesting team, so we wanted to get somebody on to preview them, do a little look around the AFC North, and felt he was a good place to start. And then that definitely turned out to be the case here. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and throw it to our interview with Mike Sans right after I give you guys our typical spiel to follow us on social media. At Podcast Beatdown on Twitter. You can follow me at Jake Luke. That is Louque. Spencer is at Ravens 4 Dummies. That's the number 4. And check us out on Instagram as well. Getting pretty active on there. Baltimore_Beatdown_podcast. And we're also getting going on YouTube as well at Baltimore Beatdown. We're starting to get some more plans to get a little more active on there too. So go ahead and subscribe. We're getting closer and closer to that 1,000 subscriber mark. Spencer's been doing a great job putting out sort of daily recaps that he's doing as he goes to training camp practices each and every day that he's available to. So he's going to be getting back at that next week, I think, starting on Monday. So subscribe to Baltimore Beatdown on YouTube to go ahead and jump into those because they've been really good. He's knocking it out of the park. So like I said, check those out. Check us out on social. And hope you guys enjoy our interview with Mike Sans. So without further ado, here it is. You guys have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again early next week. All right, we now welcome on a very special guest. It is Mike Sans from Locked On Bengals joining us. Wanted to do a little bit of a AFC North whip-around preview series type thing, so I guess we're starting here with Cincy. Mike is kind enough to hop on with us, talk a little bit of Bengals here for however long it's going to be. But Mike, how's it going, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right, man.
Doing real well. We appreciate you jumping on.
Yep, absolutely. So I guess before we get going here, how about you give us a little origin story? What got you into football? What got you into the old Cincy Bengals there? And what got you into the position where you're talking to two clowns like us on a Thursday night?
Yeah, I played football. I mean, I played like flag. My dad didn't want me to play till middle school. So I played in middle school. I wanted to be a wide receiver. I was quickly moved to tight end, and then I was a 150-pound left guard. I just got into like everything from there, like scheme, strategy, technique, everything like that. I mean, being a 180-pound left guard in high school, it was all technique. There was no mass on me to move people. And then with the Bengals, my dad was a Browns fan. And I mean, growing up, I was born in 96. So by the time I was like conscious of football, it was like 2001, and the Browns were just god awful. And my mom was a Bengals fan. So I was like, no, that one. And it just stuck.
Plus Skyline Chili. So you were like, I'm in. Boom.
Yeah. She took me to Skyline Chili eventually, and I like it, even if I'm from more Northeast Ohio than where it originates.
It's part of the culture there. And, the only part that grosses me out is I went with a buddy. I've only been like maybe 3 times. I've been in Cincy a couple times. And my buddy, he'll just get the pasta. Full pasta. He wants to go when it opens at either 10 or 11 a.m., whichever. I think it was 10 a.m. Dude will do an entire bowl of pasta, all of the chili, all of the cheese, sour cream, the whole 9 yards. I'm like, brother, man, I love the nasty, dirty sauce, but it is 10 a.m. I can't do that yet.
Yeah, my brother went to college in Cincinnati, and I was there like in one of the winter months, I remember. And like the only time I ever had it, like I thought it was great because it was like freezing out, at Cincinnati in the winter. And I was like, yeah, Skyline chili's great. And then I started to hear some divided opinions on it as I started to get a little bit older. But I don't know. I'm a fan.
I usually tell people that aren't from Cincinnati or even Ohio is just like, get a hot dog with chili on it. They'll be way more normal for you.
Exactly. So yeah, talking hot dogs first, getting the important stuff out of the way, the guard play, the hot dogs, the pasta with chili on it, all the good stuff. Moving on to the old Cincinnati Bengals, formerly the Fighting Andy Daltons, which has been quite the whirlwind. Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco, in my opinion, had such similar careers at one point, but that's a story for another time. So running through the Bengals offseason here, of course, the major question, the pertinent, burning question, Jamar Chase or Penny Sewell. And I'm going to go ahead and throw the monkey wrench in. My guy was Rashawn Slater. But ultimately, the Bengals end up bringing in Riley Reef, doing a little construction. They bring in some pass rushing help on a gentleman from the Saints who had a gigantic breakout year that we'll get into a little bit when we're talking defense. And saw William Jackson go and some other moves. So overall, take us through, the whirlwind of this Bengals offseason, and especially, that whole conversation leading up through the free agency and draft of Sewell versus Chase and all that good stuff.
Well, as a former offensive lineman in high school, I'm definitely more on offensive line than I was wide receiver. So I was team Penny Sewell or whatever. It didn't matter. I mean, once we signed Riley Reef, I was like, oh, we're drafting Chase because we didn't pick up a Tyrell Williams or like Josh Reynolds to be like a fine third wide receiver. And then, I mean, on defense, yeah, we signed Trey Hendrickson. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a downgrade from Carl Lawson. I don't think he creates as well. And I also just don't like that he wears those long sleeves and without gloves. It'll probably grow on me eventually.
His aesthetic
that's definitely
pathetic.
that's something that like we would key in on there. So I really respect that.
Yeah, Larry Ogunjobi signed. I feel like nobody talks about that, but he has flashes of really good and
explosive. Explosive.
He does this head slap thing like it's 1974 sometime. He slapped against us. He slapped Mike Jordan in the head, and then he was on a stunt. And he slapped Jonah in the head. It's like, I love this. We lost William Jackson, to Washington, and then we signed Chidobe Awuzie, who's fine. I think it's a downgrade, but it's like, I don't know. Will wasn't as locked in as he could be, I think, because, I mean, we're losing every single season, and he got tired of it. And then, I mean, I know he didn't have good experiences with fans and stuff, so I don't know. He just didn't seem to.
He was due for a fresh start.
Yeah, he needed a fresh start. And, I mean, we signed Mike Hilton. That's cool.
Mike Hilton, one of the most underrated. I mean, you, and everybody from Browns Nation as well, the dog pound knows. Mike Hilton is one of the best blitzing slot corners in the NFL, one of the nastiest nickels that there is.
He would have a chance at being like, I don't know, maybe even like Hall of Fame level. If he could do coverage as good as he does blitzing and fitting the run, it's like he's like a linebacker over there. And then it's like in coverage, yeah, he's fine. He's not terrible. It's just like, oh man, I wish that was up to par with everything.
Just kind of flip it on its head a little bit, and
if it was like pretty good blitzing and fitting the run, and then like amazing coverage, I'd be like, whoo. But I'm still happy with it. I don't know. I think the offseason went fine. I think it could have went better. I think we should have invested more in the offensive line. Not that it's going to be as bad as the media is saying, because we're replacing Mike Jordan with Quentin Spain. That's an upgrade. We replace whoever was at right guard, Alex Redmond, Fred Johnson, a whole list of people with Jackson Carman, and I have no idea how that's going to go. I thought there was some positive and some negative.
I like Jackson Carman a lot. So hey, if you want to go that end, I was pretty high on him. I thought he deserves a shot as a tackle. Then see if he moves inside and kind of teeing you up a little bit. Just the whole conversation that a rookie offensive lineman in general is going to come in and in year one be a stabilizing force is very strange and I think obtuse. So I think bringing in those veterans was a much better move than people realize.
Yeah, what I wanted to do was to bring in Joe Thuney and a tackle like Matt Filer or something. We got Riley Reef, who I think is as good or better than Matt Filer. So honestly, I mean, if you want the take, it's like Penei Sewell early this season isn't going to be as good as Riley Reef would be. I mean, like game 1, game 2, by the end of the season, he could be as good, sure. But I mean, it's a rookie offensive tackle. Sometimes those guys are Tristan Wirfs and they hit the ground running, and
who also plays with 3 other All-Pros on the offensive line.
Right. Like Jedrick Wills does too. I'm like, yeah, they're good because they're next to these guys as well. It's not just him by himself. And then you get an Andrew Thomas who doesn't have help over there. He's playing next to Will Hernandez and he doesn't hit the ground running. Our guy would be playing next to Quentin Spain or Xavier Suafilo, and that's not an all-pro lineman to help him out. That's like decent, maybe a little below average. I don't know, somewhere around there.
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of curious, and this is definitely a little bit more of a meta, like philosophical question, pulling it back a little bit. But like we're talking a lot about like roster construction, and there was the whole debate at the top of the draft that you touched on with Sewell versus Chase, and obviously they wound up going Chase. And I was maybe a little more convinced it was going to be in the other direction because to me, like picking the offensive lineman, like the kind of the boring, safe choice, that just felt like kind of a Mike Brown move. When I say the words Mike Brown, what is the first thing that comes into your mind as a Bengals fan? Because I'm always curious.
The very first thing is old, but the second thing is probably kind of cheap. And then the third thing is, son of Paul Brown.
That was beautiful. That is a 6-word summary that hits every head.
I think he's a nice guy. He's like the poorest owner in the league. So when he's cheap, it's like, I don't know. I kind of get it, but at the same time, I'm like, God, how are you supposed to compete when you just won't give guaranteed money to people?
Yeah, and I'm curious on that front because it's like every NFL franchise, and like even including the Bengals to a degree, it's like they all involuntarily, or not involuntarily, but like they pretty much all just by proxy became these, multi-billion-dollar like international corporations essentially, and like the Bengals are in that group, but they still sometimes operate what feels like a mom and pop shop, and I think he's kind of at the center of that. So I'm always kind of curious to hear Bengals perspectives on him. I don't think he's like the worst owner in the league, but he's just sort of one of the more interesting figures where he kind of runs it still like a family business in some ways.
Yeah, you could hit the opposite end and be Dan Snyder, and I think that's worse. Where you're spending all your money and you're a bad person. It's like, okay, yeah, I feel even worse about being the fan of this team because at least, I think he's a nice guy. I think people like him. You never hear about him with any weird scandals like what happens in Washington sometimes. So
yeah, we're like right next door to that, so we're privy to all that. Like maybe a little bit more than we want to be, but yeah, always curious about Mike Brown.
Yeah, the one thing about him doing offensive line or wide receiver, he loves wide receivers. If you ever listen to him talk, I mean, he loves Isaac Curtis back in the 70s and 80s. Oh, God, I hope I was right. He loves, like, Chad Johnson still. That's why Chad's always showing up to Bengals, and he's doing stuff there. He loves wide receivers. I think that's...
No shout-out to Mr. Collinsworth?
Collinsworth, also great. Yeah, I think he gets enough love with PFF and being in football.
Definitely. But yeah, I wanted to flip this conversation a little bit, talk a little defense, which is, to me, I mean, all this talk is the offense. It's basically Chase, the offensive line, and I just think it is so negligent how much the transitions on the Bengals defense and what they kind of went into the OR, so to speak, and busted out the scalpel, cut it open, and made some moves. I mean, big moves with William Jackson and Carl Lawson, two of your, cornerstone, arguably, players defensively gone, and then a litany of others brought in, a lot of younger guys that are now going to have to step into bigger roles too. And I mean, people ignore the fact the Bengals offense was efficient. Joe Burrow does go down. That was what it was. But the Bengals defense was definitely the weaker unit a lot of the time last year from what I saw, and, wasn't watching every single snap, but I think that getting that defense right was an imperative move. So how do you feel about the defensive moves that the Bengals have made so far, and where do you see that fitting this season, and where are they strong, where are they weak?
I do think it's interesting that, from a national media perspective, it seems like everybody just says, and the defense sucks. It's like we didn't do anything. It's like, I mean, maybe it does, but we did stuff. It's not like we didn't do anything. We signed Ogunjobi. We re-signed Mike Daniels. I love Mike Daniels. I think he's just still
such good value, so cheap.
He's like $2 million, and he's a really good run stopper that can play 1.5, 2 gaps. DJ Reader's coming back. He was gone like 11, 12 games last year.
I loved that signing at the time. It was so underrated. No one talked about it, and he was so damn good in Houston. So definitely going to help out a lot.
I appreciate this. Well, I think the defense, every move is like we're moving. I think we're moving away from playing. Well, I think we played cover one man the most last year. And I think we're trying to move more towards cover 3, but then also signing Mike Hilton makes me think we're going to bring some creepers and fire zones that Baltimore loves killing us with. So I think it'll be interesting. I think the thing with like Lou Anarumo is I don't know how you're supposed to trust him so far, where he's led 2 terrible units so far in his career. I think his scheme's fine. It's like single high, let Jesse Bates roam sideline to sideline, and then we'll play cover 3 or cover 1 for the most part. I don't know. I think to be seen on the defense. I think it should be interesting. I think our pass rush should be better. I mean, we were one of the worst in the league. And even losing Carl Lawson, who I think was and still would be our best pass rusher. We had Joseph Osai in the draft, who's got a really good get off. Cam Sample, I don't know what he's going to give in pass rush, but he's a rotational piece so far. Looks good in training camp, but that's also against our backup interior offensive line, which is terrible. Mike Hilton just adds like 5 sacks, which is great if we use him that way. There's a lot of pieces. There's a lot that I think there's a way this hits, and we have, I don't know, an average, maybe even above average defense. And there's also a way none of this hits, and we end up with a terrible defense. For strength and weaknesses, the quick one is I think our biggest strength is going to be, I want to say run defense, because we have DJ Reader, we have all these things, but the linebackers kind of concern me a little bit with their run defense. I don't think they take on blocks from guards that well. I kind of think it might be the defensive backs and the coverage back there. And then if we're not getting pressure, that still gets shredded. But that's a strength, I think, for the most part. Trey Waynes is – I think we have 2 what we would, I guess, call 2 cornerback 2s. They're like high-end cornerback 2s, guys you don't want to put on
you don't want to put on an island.
You don't want to put them on an island, but you don't – you're not against having them against – like man-to-man against a guy. As long as it's not the guy, it's like a guy. Where I don't know.
That's where Jesse Bates comes in. If there's a guy, Jesse Bates is going to be able to seal some angles.
That was the last thing I was going to say. Was just that I think you can get away with lower cornerback talent when you have a guy like Jesse Bates giving help sideline to sideline. Because I mean, you look at what Chidobe played with. Like Xavier Woods was not playing sideline to sideline in single high. He was taking a head off if the guy came hash to hash. So I think that'll help them look better than they are.
Yeah, ever since the Bengals kind of drove a knife right into the Ravens' heart a couple of years ago in Week 17, I've kind of been making the joke that was the game that sort of made the Ravens, sort of look inwardly and realize it was time to move on from Joe Flacco. So that's sort of maybe me rationalizing and spin zoning that game a little bit as the one that got us Lamar Jackson, as painful as it was at the time. What is kind of your first thought as a fan? I know we kind of already touched on this a little bit before we got going, but when you see Lamar Jackson walking out onto the field on a Sunday or whatever it is when he's about to play the Bengals.
I swear to God, I wish he was just in the NFC. He is so fun to watch. And it's like a Bengals fan saying all this. He is the worst person. I think he's harder to scheme against just on paper than even like a Patrick Mahomes who can make every throw, because you could play perfect coverage. It's almost like you're not allowed to play man anymore. And people say, put a spy on him. He just outruns the spy. It's like
the Seahawks tried to do that with Bobby Wagner. They tried to do it with safety. He just cruises right by.
Yeah, they're like, what, we're gonna have Logan Wilson catch him? It's like, no, he's decent fast for a linebacker, but I mean, you got to put like your kick returner in there to try to tackle him. I don't know. He's so good. I don't understand the idea where it's like just stop the run. It's like, yeah, I wish I could. You run the counter bash, counter read, all that stuff where it's not read like zone read anymore, where it's like, oh, you just squeeze one guy down, you scrape over the top, and that's how you
I think they were like 11th in read options last year.
Yeah, no, but what are they in like counter bash? Because it's got to be like by far number
they're
1.
They're like 1 through 31.
It was weirdly a lot more too after he came back from COVID, and he just really started cutting it loose in the run game.
Yeah, I mean, that thing's just so difficult to defend where he has the poolers in front of him and the back is the one that's basically playing like the quarterback, like,
it just sucks to be a linebacker. You're going to be flat-footed or you're going to be guessing, and you're probably going to be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea to play against him is to try to do that thing the Chargers did years ago, which doesn't work as well anymore, but it's like play like 7 defensive backs, and because your linebackers just don't matter in this. Then you get Mark Andrews, and it's like, okay, but we got to play underneath on him too, which I guess you probably want to use. I don't know.
Then they come in with Nick Boyle. Then they come in with Pat Ricard, and then Boyle, it's a different game.
Blow up the defensive backs playing linebacker. It's like, I don't know. I would play Jesse Bates on Mark Andrews because I think he can handle that. And then I don't know. It's so difficult. It's like you put Von Bell deep, I guess. I hope that doesn't.
Von Bell's a fine safety. He's fine.
He's not moving sideline to side. You know what I said? Xavier Woods is like hash to hash. That's kind of similar with Von Bell. It's like if he's deep middle of the field, he's like hash to hash, maybe a little bit outside that. He's not going to stop a go route, even if it's inside. Really.
Yeah, he's taking the seams. He's worried about the seams a little bit, and over top and all that good stuff.
Yeah, he's a nightmare. That's I guess the one word is that it's nightmare. I don't know how a defensive coordinator really puts that together.
It's definitely been an interesting development. If you have a Derwin James and a Joey Bosa kind of headlining that attack the Chargers had, that's one way to help. But yeah, and another area I'm interested in is where is the Bengals run game going, and how are they going to get it more solidly? It feels like Joe Mixon, when he's able to have an impact, when the Bengals are able to get some rushing concepts working, what does that look like, and where do they want that to go? Does it feel like?
I'm glad you asked, because I forgot to mention with all the offensive line stuff, we hired a new offensive line coach. I thought Jim Turner was probably bottom 3 offensive line coaches in the league, mostly known for the bullying Jonathan Martin and Richie Incognito scandal. But Frank Pollock, I think, is great. His work with the Cowboys is good. Every time he takes over a team, it seems like, well, the Cowboys were already great, so because they had Bill Callahan before him. But you look at the Jets, and they look better over time. Mekhi Becton hits the ground running because he has a great offensive line coach, and that's another thing we could look at with not just having good linemen next to those guys that hit the ground running, but you look at Bill Callahan was coaching Jedrick Wills, and you have, the Buccaneers guy. I can't think of his name, but he's doing a great job. They have all those all pros developed by him. I think it's going to be a wide zone centric. We're moving back to that, which I thought Zach Taylor tried to do for like 3 weeks here. And then he was like, oh, this isn't working. So then he moved away from that. We've been kind of shotgun inside zone stuff. And now I think we're going to put Burrow under center more. I think it's going to be wide zone under center, because that's the only way anybody on this team likes to run it, even if you can run it from pistol.
I like to call that the offense, because it is like trending so much now. The wide zone boot, it's like the Titans, the Browns, the Vikings. It's like you have that loosely mobile quarterback that can work really well, has good ball fakes, and is pretty accurate. So I think that it's not a bad direction to go to try and develop an offensive identity.
Yeah, it's harder to develop the identity around counter bash and that stuff. You need a little bit more of a runner at quarterback. So under center wide zone fits. I always think of the best running backs in the league. Derrick Henry, wide zone. Dalvin Cook, wide zone. Nick Chubb, wide zone. Well, he's running more power stuff too. That's just what you get when you get like Bill Callahan as your offensive line coach.
Exactly.
Yeah, you touched on Burrow a little bit there, and I kind of touched on the offensive line, I guess sort of bringing it back around to what we were sort of talking about with Jackson. What does the timeline look like for us two as Ravens fans to have that same feeling that you have about Jackson with Burrow trotting onto the field? What is kind of going to have to happen this year? We kind of touched before we got going about, some of the reports coming out of practice. I think it's kind of all bullshit, to be honest. Let's give the guy a couple days to reacclimate to that, knee and everything, and it's going to take some time. But
you'll never hear that about Dak Prescott, though, even though you see all these clips. It's just different flavors for different places.
Yeah. So what is the timeline for Joe Burrow to become the sort of all-pro that I think people were expecting him to be, and hopefully still can be?
So I think this year, what we're going to look for, I think he could win comeback player of the year over Dak. I think that's possible. But I don't think you're going to look at an all-pro this year, because you're going to have, even if the schedule is easier up front than it is in the back, and he should get stronger throughout the back half off of a torn ACL. All I'm really looking for is that he's not going to be scared to have his foot down and throw with a body around it. That's something he did at LSU all the time, where somebody be falling down right around him and he's still stepping in and throwing that ball. He did it for the Bengals too. And that's actually what got him hurt, was he stepped in, threw a ball, even though John Allen was right there. So that's just something you can't lose. When you lose that, you become like Jimmy Garoppolo.
Carson Wentz.
Yeah. When you lose the confidence to just step and throw with bodies,
you can't go into the zone, when you can't just, you can't put the blinders on.
And he can also, like, he steps into his throws, but he's also, like, we talked about him not being super mobile. He is, like, kind of sneaky mobile still, though. I mean, like, I think back to that very first game. What did he score? His first touchdown was like a 20-yard rushing touchdown. Like, he could scoot a little bit.
Great spatial awareness.
And run.
Yeah.
That was a quarterback draw.
Yeah, and he's a unit, too. Like, he can get out in space. Like, I wouldn't necessarily, like, want to tackle him if I'm, like, one of these smaller defensive backs. So he's a guy who's got a good, it's kind of a little cliche to call a white dude, like, sneaky athletic in the year 2021. So I won't say that about him, but he's athletic, man. He can move around.
It is what it is. I mean, you see the pasty white guy that can run a little bit. You're like, he's sneaky athletic, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Tony Romo, deceptively fast.
That's my high end. Like, he could hit this in his career is Tony Romo, I think, where he's not going to have the arm talent to ever be, I don't know, Aaron Rodgers, who's sneaky fast and can throw a ball 70 yards through a brick wall. But I think he could be Tony Romo. He's got the pocket awareness, the pocket movement, everything like that, decision-making. He's really smart already for a rookie. There was a play against the Browns where he saw them check into, I think it was like a zone it call against two receivers that are close, and he had a pick play. And he said it kind of looked like he was playing a clarinet. So I'm sorry giving away trade secrets. But
yeah, we're writing all this down right now.
Sending it in. Yeah, he looked like he was playing like Squidward. And then Tyler Boyd ran a fake screen, like a fake pick play where he started to go out and then he just busted back in. And
those were very in vogue last year. The fake pick.
That was the one where we hit that at the right time. We're just now hitting wide zone. I don't know, 30 years late at this point? Everybody's been doing it.
Absolutely. So in terms of, looking at this tight end room, this receiver room, that's where all the glory is. That's where all the media attention is and what they're going to be able to do. I mean, it was already such a strong group. Ravens fans, many of our listeners are, even though he didn't have a great year last year, blessed to see AJ Green leave and never be seen again. The Raven killer himself. Arguably the number one Raven killer of all time alongside the Jaguars' Jimmy Smith. Absolute menaces to society whenever they see the purple and black. But now you've got Tyler Boyd, the Heartbreak Kid himself from a couple years ago. You've got my favorite wide receiver 4 or 5 in the entire NFL, maybe other than gentleman in Denver Tim Patrick. Gosh, I was blanking.
Ravens legend.
Looking at Auden, like if Auden Tate is your 5th receiver, your room is an Adonis. Your room is absolutely stacked. So how are you feeling? Obviously high, and where do you see this room going, and how can they maybe open up things a little bit more based on what the changes have been from this year to from last year to this year?
Yeah, wide receiver room looks awesome. I mean, that's what happens when you draft a guy top 5 and you already had T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. I think T. Higgins is going to be the best receiver for us this year. I think he'll probably finish with the most yards and touchdowns. I think that just comes with, if you're expecting Jamar Chase to come in and be better than Justin Jefferson because he was the, quote, wide receiver 1 in college, it's like Justin Jefferson just had arguably the best, second best.
Broke Randy Moss's rookie receiver record.
You shouldn't expect that. I'm hoping for maybe 1,000 yards and he looks good, and that the 4.34 wasn't cooked. I'm hoping that's somewhat real. But T. Higgins, I mean, he knows how to play wide receiver already. He's at an NFL level, and he almost hit 1,000 yards. If he didn't pull a hammy on a runaway touchdown against you guys, week 17, he might have hit 1,000 yards. But I mean, the room's awesome. I think we're not the best wide receiver room in general. I think you'd have to give that to the Cowboys or the Buccaneers. I'm not going to go full homer there. I think they're just more proven commodities, whereas I think you have a case the Bengals have the best room for the next 3 years because Antonio Brown will be gone. I don't think the Cowboys have the money to keep all 3, and Gallup's going to be coming up, and you have to pay CeeDee Lamb. So we're going to be stuck here for the next 3 years with this group, and it's a good group to have. And I agree, Auden Tate's an awesome 4. I don't love him on the field every down just because, mainly in our group, if we had Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin, like the Washington football team, I keep talking about them, but I would be fine with sending Auden Tate out there. But it's like our group is like T. Higgins 4.5, Tyler Boyd 4.6, Auden Tate 4.8. It's like, okay, yeah, just play nobody deep. Just try to cover that with your corners. But then you add Jamar Chase, who, quote unquote, 4.34 technically. I thought he looked like 4.4, but it's still fast. either way.
We also didn't see him for a year, and he trained. He got that 40 down pat.
No idea if it's true, but we'll see. Tight ends, they're kind of whatever. I like Drew Sample the most, which is the weird one to like because he does a really good job run blocking. He had a play last year where he was going, there's an insert zone or ISO play. I can't exactly remember, but he's going up to the linebacker and he notices, I think our center lost the battle to Cam Hayward, as you do. And
as you do.
He sealed Cam Hayward by himself. And I was like, oh my goodness, this could be like our Nick Boyle. We just need to use him. He's not a great receiver, but he's just a really good run blocker. He's only 2 years pro. That probably wasn't worth the second round pick just based off of value of blocking tight ends, but he's a good player. Uzoma is going to be interesting as well just because he's coming off an Achilles, and that's so difficult for any professional athlete to come back from. And really all he had was basically his athleticism, I think.
He's a long, lithe player, too. That's, coming down on that with some of the leaping catches that he makes, that might be kind of tough.
Yeah, that's bread and butter, those little stick and nod type things and those seam routes.
He was open on one in camp. Camp doesn't camp whatever, but I saw him running a stick and nod in camp. I was like, okay, he can still do it.
There you go.
So hit him in stride. Maybe he lost a tenth of a second on the 40, but he's still a big guy that can catch.
Definitely. Well, we got the Hall of Fame game going here, which I'm just dying to go and watch. So I got my my last question here for you, buddy. Who is going to be the Cincinnati Bengals head coach in 2022?
Oh God. We had to put out the thing that Zach Taylor is still our head coach. Like nobody has to say yeah, he's still our coach. No, you release that if they get fired. Not if you keep him.
Listen, he could be an answer.
I think he's fine, but I think we move on. Personally, I want, if we move on, to get Eric Bieniemy. I just love what he does with the Chiefs. But I think we would go for Joe Brady. And I think if he looks good again with Carolina, that just makes so much sense. Where we just become.
That's kind of the golden ticket.
They've been talking about that going back to last year.
I know. Last year would have been a little early for him to come, but it still could have happened. It happened with Zach.
It happened with Cliff Kingsbury. It could happen with Joe Brady.
So yeah, I think Joe Brady. If I was going to bet, I think he would be the favorite. But I think it'd be plus odds. I think there's a lot of guys that could win that job. Brian Dabbles and interesting could just be a nobody because I don't know. Dabble
would be a good fit. Seeing what Josh Allen's done with that kind of spread college style offense and using a lot of pre-snap communication, getting to the line quickly, all that good stuff, and hurry up. So definitely a strong answer there as well. So what is the final? Sorry, Jake, I'm going to steal your thunder. What is a happy season for a Cincinnati Bengals fan look like this year, and where does that end up? If you're feeling really confident headed into 2022, I'm gonna pop your bubble. I know you're chomping at the bit to say it's a Super Bowl championship, but let's say they
and
fall short of
probably
that
realistically thinking that, I think too. So.
So what does 2022 look like in an exciting manner for a Bengals fan at the end of 2021?
The most realistic, exciting season I see is honestly, I think 9-8. It's hard to tell with 17 games because maybe 10-7 is
a little. It's a little fishy there.
Although our extra game is the 49ers, which not an easy pool for the worst team of a division.
Yes.
So I'm thinking 9-8. I just think if you get a winning season, this team's going to be so exciting. It's going to be so exciting going into next year. I don't think they should have Super Bowl aspirations, although every team does. It's just the window is after the Browns pay Baker Mayfield $50 million, and then they lose some talent, and that's your window to compete for the AFC North. I don't think it's this year.
Okay,
absolutely.
Buddy.
Well, hey, we appreciate you so much for coming on. Thank you for coming on and talking some good old Skyline Chili first and foremost, getting that one in nice and hot. We appreciate it. So please plug yourself, tell the people where they can find you, where they can find your work, and anything else you want to get off your chest before you get out of here. You can give us the finger if you want to and say, I hate Baltimore.
No, Baltimore's fine. They have my favorite divisional game. Two of my favorite divisional games because the Tyler Boyd game that you guys hate, and then the game that
we love that one because it got us Lamar Jackson.
Right.
As I explained in the one question there, yeah.
And it kept us Marvin Lewis. So
yeah.
So, And then the other game that nobody ever talks about is that Steve Smith, AJ Green battle.
Yeah,
that
was sick.
Unbelievable. The stiff arms, the deep contested catches, that was crazy.
The 4th and 5 touchdown, from the 50-yard line. That was something.
That was an awesome game. So they're always fun games, and they're never as bad as the Steelers-Bengals games, and they're never. I don't feel like we should win as often as I do going into the Browns game. Not anymore, but like when it used to be like, oh God, are we going to lose to the Browns?
Yeah,
right.
But plugging myself at Bengals_Sans on Twitter. I do a lot of film stuff if you're interested. A lot of it's through a Bengals lens, so that is what it is. But we play the Ravens twice a year, so you'll see some stuff there. And then I write for Sports Illustrated's All Bengals, and I do podcasting with both Locked On Bengals and the Unofficial Bengals podcast.
Awesome. Well, buddy, appreciate your time. Appreciate all your great insight. You have yourself a great night here, just lapping up this Hall of Fame game, and you have yourself a great weekend beyond that, okay?
I hope you guys have a great weekend too.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Gorlami.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.